Right now, Commerce City Police are asking for help finding a missing boy. Emmanuel Melgar is 14 years old. He was last seen Monday afternoon at his school, Adams City High School. Police say they believe that he may have been scared off by an incident at school. Anyone with information is asked to call Commerce City Police.
Well, dozens of people gathered to call for justice in the death of a 22-year-old man in Clear Creek County. Christian Glass was shot and killed by a deputy while he was having a mental health crisis. 9 News reporter Darius Johnson joins us now. And Darius, while the community remembered Christian, the deputy who shot Glass is back on patrol.
Hey there, Gary. Yeah, the deputy who allegedly fired 5 rounds, killing Christian Glass, is back on the job with the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Office. The district attorney says her office is still looking at the use of force in this case, and they'll ultimately decide whether to present this case to a grand jury. A crowd gathered in a park last night to remember the young man who they say was sweet, caring, and had a good heart. Christian's mom reminisced on the time he dressed up as an artist in elementary school. His life was cut short during a mental health crisis the night of June 11th in Clear Creek County. The 22-year-old called for help after his car got stuck on a road in Silver Plume. Inside his car were rocks he loved and hunting knives. Glass was scared and refused to get out of the car during the 70 minutes of negotiations. A Clear Creek deputy became impatient, breaking Glass's window, shooting him with beanbag rounds, tasing him, and ultimately firing 5 rounds, killing him.
He was such a freaking happy kid, just full of life. We're all just devastated. It got extinguished so young by this devastating tragedy, and it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened, but it did, and we have to learn to live with our loss.
Christian's mother, Sally, who you just heard from there, is now calling for charges to be brought against the deputy. At the vigil last night, organizers called Christian's death a, quote, failure of responding officers, and said Clear Creek County could have prevented this.
Yeah, it is a sad story, that's for sure. Darius, thank you for bringing us up to date. When someone is having a mental health crisis and calls the police, they get help. On where they get help will depend on what happens next. 1
in 3 counties in Colorado has a state-funded program to respond to mental health calls with someone other than officers. 9 News reporter Steve Steger looks into what's stopping every community from trying this new approach.
Summit County Sheriff Jamie Fitzsimons calls his co-responding crews, complete with clinicians, the future of policing. But he will tell you the future takes a lot of work.
And I hear people try to make it sound so simple. You know, there's millions of dollars coming down from the state. You just need to apply for it. Then you stand up a team and you just go do it. And it's not that easy.
Fitzsimons funds his mental health program in part through Colorado's Behavioral Health Administration. The BHA told us today they fund co-responder programs in 24 of Colorado's 64 counties. A spokeswoman told us there are other co-responder programs that don't get state funding, but the BHA funds the majority of these programs.
There are far too few of them.
Vincent Achidi is the president of Mental Health Colorado, advocating for these programs all over.
Universally, they are not available everywhere they need to be available or all the times they need to be available.
Fitzsimons says he thinks what's stopping some sheriffs and police chiefs is the unreliable funding for these programs.
It takes a lot to go after these grants, and they're never guaranteed the next year in the same amount. I had one grant that I got $385,000 one year and $40,000 the next. So now I have a deficit. So now I'm scrambling around with hat in hand trying to make up that deficit.
We are always begging. We go with our hat in our hand, as you say, as if this were some experimental new thing that nobody had any confidence in, but we're going to give it a little whirl. Nobody is arguing. I've never heard anybody arguing about the validity of this programming.
What's going on, man?
But Achidi also says this will take a culture adjustment to make sure anyone calling 911 at any time gets the help that they need.
There ought to be cost shifting within agencies and communities to ensure that that's the case.
According to the Behavioral Health Administration, the departments funded by this program made contact with almost 26,000 people between July 2020 and June 2021. That is the most recent data they have available. Sometimes a call to 911 doesn't warrant a visit to the emergency room, like when you have a sprained ankle or a bad headache.
And now in Boulder, at least, there is a new way for dispatchers to help make that decision. It is called a nurse navigator program. If the dispatcher decides that the caller doesn't need to go to the ER but still needs some help, they can transfer that call to a nurse. Then that nurse can decide what is best for the patient, whether it is urgent care, telehealth, or just advice over the phone. They say this will help free up services that already are short-staffed.
It's good for the community, right? Again, it's getting those community members to the right resources at the right time.
Yeah, this program expected to help with about 10% of the calls. If a caller can't get to an urgent care clinic, pharmacy, or somewhere else, then the nurse can also arrange for a ride, a lift, to come pick them up. Pueblo already has this program up and running, and by the end of the year, they say there'll be 6 more areas with this program.
The city of Denver will not get a chance to retry its case over police use of force during the protests after George Floyd's murder. Back in March, a jury awarded 12 protesters a total of $14 million for the police force used during those protests. Now, News reporter Jordan Chavez joins us now. And Jordan, a judge denied the city's request for a new trial. So what happens next?
Well, Corey, let me tell you, it sounds like this is far from over. Every decision so far has been made at the trial court level. So as the defendants, the city could take this to the Colorado Court of Appeals and then possibly the Colorado Supreme Court. In fact, that is exactly what our legal analyst is expecting to happen. Now, Whitney Traylor told me when there's a $14 million judgment on the line, even if your efforts are unsuccessful and it costs another $50,000 in attorney fees, it would be worth the possibility of overturning such a huge verdict. Now, the clock is ticking. The city actually has 45 days to file their appeal. There's a few things they could be looking to get out of this, either a new trial, the verdict to be overruled altogether, or even a reduction in the money owed. One thing that's for certain, though, this process is likely to be lengthy.
If this ultimately gets appealed all the way to the Supreme Court of Colorado, you could be looking at, 2.5 years. And then, of course, if it gets remanded, or if they say you need to go back to the trial court to hear a certain part of it, this thing could go on and on for many years.
And it's important for us to note that while this is being litigated, none of the protesters have actually seen any of this money. Depending on what happens in the appeals court, either side could escalate it to the state Supreme Court, as we mentioned, but there's no guarantee the Supreme Court would choose to pick up that case, Corey.
So all of this money is stalled for the protesters. And as Whitney was saying, this could be something that really just goes on and on, depending on appeals and retrials and everything.
And Corey, at that point, then it could become a battle of who can financially sustain this battle as it plays out in court longer.
And I have a feeling the city has some deep pockets when it comes to that.
I think you'd be right, Corey.
Jordan, thank you.